Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Just a quick intro. This is Kevin Carter. He's done all three of the Global Rescue Xredrocks, as a long background in hang gliding. And so none of us knew him really well when he first showed up, but he was mean and ready to roll and super fit. And he's been right in there all 3 years. He's made some really cool, impressive, pretty creative moves every year. It does really well in the air, and he's an animal on the ground. And so he's going to share with you, how that came to be, how he made the switch, and how he's kind of chasing the hike and fly thing now, and what's working. I'm assuming what isn't, and refining as he goes along. So this will be.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated to hear this. So yeah, Kevin, take it over.
All right. So my assumption is you guys are up and coming challenge division athletes trying to get focused on hike and fly and learn as much as you can. Flying tends to drive a stoke and a fever in us all that pushes us very hard to do as much as possible in a short amount of time. At least that's how it has always been for me, and what I observe in other people. So Gavin asked me to give you guys a talk and share some of my experiences. Like all pilots, I'm really good at talking about myself, so I try not to too much. I'm going to talk just enough, hopefully, to give you the context and the background to see the lessons I've learned from my successes and mistakes, and hopefully still keep it interesting. So my flying background is primarily hang gliding. I started hang gliding about 20 years ago and found a great deal of success in a short amount of time. I think I went from training hill to US #1 in a year and a half, 2 years. I was like any other crazy hang glider or paraglider pilot. I threw 100% into it, and I learned a tremendous amount about race to goal, primarily in hang gliding, and that was my primary flying background for a long time. And then around COVID, I was interested in something new, wanted a new challenge, and got into paragliding. And then one of my hang glider buddies said, "Hey, they just announced this thing called XRR. You got to do a lot of hiking. You like endurance sports. You like flying. You like this." So to me, that was another challenge, another carrot being dangled in front of my face, and it was another sport to try to decode and figure out and optimize. I love equations that need to be optimized, and usually for speed, for trying to be as fast as possible. My primary athletic background is in endurance sports. I was an accomplished high school runner. Around college, I delved into triathlon. I raced on the Olympic development team for 6 or 7 years. Then I got married, had kids, and I got into endurance mountain biking for a while, and a lot of science-based training, very methodical, very data-driven, trying to extract as much from the human machine as possible. That really refined what I had learned as a younger man, as a triathlete, was my experiences as a mountain bike racer into my 40s. And then I delved into racing cyclocross for a while, because it was yet another challenge, and I was tired of training 20 hours a week to race stupid bicycles. And then I got into paragliding. I'm like, this is great. I don't have to do anything. I just have to, go fly and have fun. I don't have to exercise. And then someone told me about hike and fly racing. And I was like, oh, you have to sweat. Ooh, let's go. So I have a lot of background in these sports and training. So for me, coming into hike and fly, that's really what to do to optimize fitness is the easy part. What I find, ironically, I'm sure Kevin can relate a little bit, is what gets harder every year is actually applying what you know you should do and can do. And I come up short every single year, but I always talk a lot of trash and say I'm going to do a lot. My history. So for 2021, that was the first year of Xredrocks, and I came into it pretty fit. My preparation was mostly focused on vertical and running. Those are the two really important ones for me. I don't like random hikes and things like that. For me, training has to have a purpose, and I don't like going downhill. Downhill is a waste of time. If I have an hour and a half to work with, it's going to be an hour and a half of quality. I'm not getting 40 minutes of climbing and then a bunch of just hiking down. Hike and Fly, and in particular Xredrocks, presented some new challenges with a different scoring system, because I had a background in race to goal, and since my first years in hang gliding, I did dabble in and out and still race on occasion, but for the most part, I didn't participate in race to goal competitions. But the strategy for Xredrocks is different, with a point-based system rather than speed or time across the course, and it changes the game drastically. I think it was maybe a little frustrating for Gavin the first year when we would zip up the launch super fast, sometimes too fast, and then all sit around. And it's like, it's the scoring, it's the equation you have to optimize. I'm not running off this hill. I'm going to bomb out and have to run up some other hill, because the reality of racing in Utah is the launches are less accessible and spread out, and they demand a different strategy. And sometimes that means holding back and waiting more than it does in other places. You can't really optimize sunrise to sunset in the same way that you can in the Alps, because sometimes it's just one and done. If you sink out, the performance hit is just massive, because the next hike is so long, and the opportunity is going to be lost. So 2021, I'll just give a little bit of background about the event for me. The first day was devastatingly long, and I don't mind a long day, but I had definitely not put in the preparation for that. So the mind had experience doing that. The body had seen it before, but the preparation wasn't there. And so that took quite a bit out of me. We raced from the morning all the way till 8:30 at night. And it came down to the wire. I got in a sprint race with Hansa, where we, at 8:27, he caught up to me because he'd been watching my light, and he started running. And then so I started running with him, and he started running faster. And then I tried to psych him out. I said, Hansa, I'm a really fast runner. You're never going to beat me. You're just punishing us both. And he kind of believed me for a second, and then he did it again. And then all the way up till 8:30 at 0:00, we were running a 100-meter dash. It was crazy to race all day and end that way. But I got the point. I wasn't going to give that up. I don't care. But I paid the price. I wanted that point, and I wanted that score on that day when it was a emphasis on the ground game. And I paid the price, because then the next day I was not recovered. I was still kind of bonked, and it was tough doing the big hikes and then maintaining focus on course. And I paid the price. Like, we had a relaunch midway through the course, and I was slow. I was taking things easy. I was trying to cut myself slack, and I missed the window on the second launch, and I just didn't have anything left to go for it again. I just took a nap and called my wife and told her to come pick me up early. But that ended up working out for the best, because I knew I didn't have it that day, and I didn't want to beat a dead horse. And then the next day, I flew my own day off of Monroe. Everyone gaggled up and went somewhere else, and we were getting to cloud base. I'm like, this is stupid. Let's go on course. And I charged on course and ended up winning the day pretty easily. So for me, that down day turned out to be a big bonus. So that worked out well for me. I think I ended up tied for 5th that year with Logan. I was really happy with that, being new to a sport and surviving the adventure. I did have some problems that year. I had some problems with launching. Just flying paragliders at a high level was still a bit fresh for me. And on the last day, when I was in the front, I had problems at the last relaunch. You had to tag a top landing and relaunch, and that strong Utah wind, man, it got me again. I thought I got this launch, and what I got was bounced across the top. So it seems to be a common theme. I'm like, I got this, and I'm a little tired, and I have that competitor's drive where I see a finish line and I'm charging for it, and it's like you just have to run harder or pedal harder or paddle harder, whatever it is. I think I can just launch harder, and it doesn't fucking work that way. Because then you're bouncing and your nice hike and fly harness is torn, and you got to call up Dustin and ask him to stitch your stuff back together. So that was a lesson learned. And then we just landed and ran back to goal. So that was a fun experience for me. It got me more motivated and more focused. But most importantly, it taught me the things I didn't know, and that I didn't know about how to better prepare for hike and fly racing. So come the next year, 22, Gavin got the Euros coming out. So now it's big time. We gotta show those Euro boys what the Americans can do. And so I put even more effort into my training. I said I was going to train for real, but in the end, I ended up just training like two or 3 months pretty hard. But I put everything I had into that short amount of time. And I was very focused. I wanted to punish people on the ground. I wanted to fly my best in the air and have a very good race. And for training, one thing I missed. So the first year, I said that first day was really devastating. The lesson I learned was you really need to train with your gear on your back. Even if you don't want to run around and sweat up your nice wing, you got to find a way to train with flying gear, because I hadn't. And what punished me more than anything wasn't that I was thirsty or hungry or that my legs hurt or anything like that. It was my back was killing me. I was like sticking my trekking poles behind my backpack, trying to find all these different ways to just shift the load so I could keep going at the pace I wanted to go when like my thoracic spine was saying, screw you, like this is not working. So that was my big lesson learned from that first year was I needed to train my body to do that instead of just cross train, because I really like cross training because you can only hike and fly so much, and I don't have spare time to drive to a lot of remote areas to get in a lot of vertical. I have to keep it practical, and so that means a lot of time running, a lot of time doing vertical hikes and trying to just take sledders to go down so I can do laps to try to get vertical without a lot of wasted time, and a lot of saddle time on the bicycle if I can, because I really like how the bicycle translates to hiking, because in hike and fly, we always try to take the steepest route up the mountain. And that's not what you do when you just go out hiking on the Colorado Trail or something. Those are all cut like 5% grade maximum. And what we do in hike and fly is straight up the effing hill. And that asks a lot more of your lower back, your upper back, and your glutes. And that's what I try to focus on much more going into 22 is strength training, to transfer the endurance and stamina I had into what I needed for hiking straight up those hills. So I wouldn't fall too behind Eric Clammer, because he's really, really fast. And I don't care how much younger he is than me. I want to try to keep up with him up the hills. So cycling, squats, founders challenge exercises, things that really work on the posterior kinetic chain and get the lower back working effectively with the glutes, so that when you're entering out, hour 8 or 9 after going up hills, you're not getting tired and tweaking out your knees and straining your body in ways that it's not used to, because the primary muscles have gotten weak and worn out. Let's see, what else did I focus on? So for my physical training for going into 22, I broke it down into 2 parts. I wanted to work on the endurance aspect for the really long days, and then also focus on raising my threshold. Because what I found in year 1, depending on what's going on with the weather and different conditions, sometimes you need to go up the hill at threshold, or maybe even a little bit above, which you you pay a pretty big price for. But because of Gavin's point per place scoring strategy, that's the most efficient or effective way to tackle that challenge, is to go up as quickly as possible, because it's going to be a race of seconds, like how quickly you can pack up your bag, and how quickly you can get set up and launch, and how quickly you can get up the hill, because it makes a big difference how you can address those. And that's something I did well with the first year, and I wanted to do even better the second year. So I focused a lot on raising my threshold with threshold workouts, at threshold, also VO2 max training above threshold, trying to find enough rest so that those workouts were effective, and just trying to get a balance of those. I also took nutrition more seriously in 22. I tried to apply a lot of the techniques I had worked on as an endurance mountain bike racer. So I used to do 100-mile mountain bike races, which is like 6 or 7 hours, depending on the course. And it's similar demands to what you do in hike and fly, because you don't do 6 or 7 hours straight. But in Xredrocks, you're looking at a good, starting the day with an hour to an hour and a half climb, and then another hour, an hour and a half climb, and then some sort of long ground trek later, if the conditions permit. And so I tried to plan my training for 2 hour to hour and a half efforts at threshold or close to it, as well as still having enough fuel in the tank to do 4-hour ground slog. I shouldn't really call it a 4-hour ground slog, because a lot of times when you have those ground slogs, I'm like, game effing on, let's go. I look forward to that. I prefer the flat ground much more than going uphill, because going uphill is the skinny man's game, and I'm not skinny, and I'm not a young man. So I really like the flats, because it's easy for me to cruise at a quick pace for a really long time and just not slow down. So my training, I tried to focus on that, and mastering the nutrition, looking again at my water consumption rates, my caloric consumption rates, foods that I like now differently than what I may or may not have liked 10 years ago when I was racing mountain bikes. And really getting an idea for how it would play out when hiking with gear, and recognizing my limits. So in regular endurance training, I look very closely at my limits based on how much power I'm producing, like if it's riding a bike, or my exact velocity if it's running. With hike and fly, you have the additional factor of what's going to happen when I get to the top of this hill and I try not to kill myself. And that's a difficult one to quantify, because I know where red line is. I know how to get up that hill at the absolute fastest speed that my body is capable of. But then how do you correct for your pacing, knowing what you're going to have to do when you get to the top of the hill? Are you going to sit around and wait and recover? Are you going to wait for other pilots to start launching so you can gaggle up and have some safety and protection of the numbers? Or are you just going to get up and go as soon as you get there, because your opportunity is down course line and you need to get moving? So that's another important consideration when I'm hiking, is what do I have at the end of the hike, and what do I have the rest of the day? Let's see. So pace, calories, water. So in 22, the situation was, which was that the year that we had rain the first day. Yeah, it says T1 was straightforward with keeping the task short. So that favored really fast ascending. So that was a full threshold day where we're racing as hard as we could for an hour. And that was the discriminator for the race. And doing that very quickly was important. Now, in the challenge division, you guys have slightly different scoring parameters. So that doesn't matter as much. So take what I'm telling you and how I adjust my training accordingly, and apply it to yourselves as appropriate, because my experiences are a little bit different because I'm trying to race a slightly different race. But the overall strategies are very similar, I think, because in all hike and fly, you have the survival factor. At the top of the hill, you have to have managed your body in a way that you're not going to do something outside of your skill or comfort range and cause yourself a problem. Um, in 22, day 2 was again short for wind. So it was another full gas race to the top of the hill, everything as quickly as possible, and then race hard on the ground. And I love that. Like that's my favorite. You know, you make a couple of flying blunders and then it's just your punishment. You just get to bleed some on the asphalt to make up for it. And I love that. I enjoy that probably too much. What does that say about me? I'm a bastard. Um, let's see. Um, 2022, task 3. That was a really interesting one with really, really strong winds forecasted 90 degrees to the launchable side of the valley. And that created a lot of challenges, a lot of problems for pilots, myself included. I was a little slow at the beginning of the task and then tried to, none of the fingers that I had scoped out on the map in my preparation, none of them were very good. And you get so confident with the racing, you're so driven, you're so motivated, you're like, this finger's good, you know, this 110 cross is really only 85 cross, it'll work out fine. And 30 seconds later I'm crashed in the bottom of the gully picking my wing out of the weeds. I'm like, well, I guess it was a little bit more cross than I thought. And it's frustrating when things like that happen, but the same crap's going on for everyone. It was like people were dropping like flies all over the place trying to make the best of those really harsh conditions. And after that first mistake, I had a reset. I said, I just need to get off the hill and into the valley and race my race, because Mother Nature isn't giving me the race I want. I'm not going to get to fly. You're just going to be beating yourself again, your head against the wall, trying to move upwind for really, really high risk level. So yeah, someone might get up and fly well. And there were a couple pilots that made progress in the air, but at what cost? Like that day probably produced more pilot incidents than all 3 years combined, like just because the winds were so strong. And when I say strong, I think base wind was probably 25, maybe, Gavin, and
Yeah, it was
gusts
cranking.
over that. I definitely had gusts where I was moving backwards when I was going down into the valley. So in that instance, I just wanted to get on the ground and just start running, just plan out the endurance race. And that worked out well for me. It was a challenge budgeting water for the day. What limited how fast I ran was not how tired I was or how much food I had. It was the distance between water stops. And I calculated early in the race that my rate of water consumption at that velocity, I was not going to make it to the next guaranteed water stop. So I had to actually slow down just to lower my temperature so I wasn't sweating as fast, so I wouldn't run out of water, which is kind of mind-boggling to imagine, but that's what it was. And we got out to the turnaround point. For about 3 hours, I was chasing Jeff Longcore. So is Jeff on this call? Probably not.
No,
Jeff's a great guy and a lot of fun and very competitive. And I knew he was in front of me. He knew I was behind him, and he knew I was going to bust my ass to try to catch him, because we had been in that position before in some other events. And I put everything I had to chase him for 3 or 4 hours or so to try to get to him. And when I got him, the funny side story, when I caught up to him, Gavin had gotten some more water out on course. So thankfully we had some water at the turnaround point, and he was just laid back in his pickup truck, just done, completely done. I don't think he had done the same calculation about water, and he wanted to stay ahead of me at all costs. And the ultimate cost for him was he was done. He was done racing. His day was over. He was completely tapped out. But we were in such a great position at that point. The pilots who had gone on the hill had gotten skunked, and things hadn't worked out for other people. So we just hung out for a while. I encouraged him to rehydrate and not give up, because that hellacious wind was actually dying down, and it was looking like we could fly the 40K or whatever, 50K back home. So since we were in the lead, there was only one other guy ahead of us, and so we had a marker, and luckily he refreshed, he got a bunch of water, and he crawled his way up that hill ever so slowly, and we did get to relaunch and fly the rest of the task. And that worked out great, because it ended up blasting off, and it was really fun. It was a great way to end the competition. um, let's see, takeaways from that event. After some of the climbs, I had trouble launching. So I mentioned that before. It seems to be a common theme in all the Xredrocks. I'm focused on getting somewhere, and I break for no one. And I lay out my wing and try to do my thing, and it just would not work out. I'm like, this isn't what happens at home. My glider's all tangled up in the crap again, and then I try to rush through it, and it would get tangled up again, and it would just get worse and worse and worse. So I've had incidents similar to that at all the Xredrocks. And so my takeaway from that has been to really, really, really practice my crappy launching inflations when I'm free flying. So I picked a bad spot with the bushes and the long grass and everything else, and practice my layouts. Because if you don't hike and fly regularly in the wilderness, you just you don't experience the kind of adversity that you face in Xredrocks. And I learned it was really important to slow down and do it right, and just ignore everything that was going on around me. Didn't matter if 10 or 15 guys that I beat up the hill all had gotten there and were laying out their wings and launching and getting away. You just have to focus on getting it right and train for that in your free time. So I got another 363 days to train for the next year of not screwing up my launches, because it's so important. Like you bust your butt to be 5 minutes faster up a climb, and then lose 10 or 15 minutes to screwed up launches or problematic inflations. And that's not a very good way to expend your energy. So then moving on to 2023, I feel like I had the most information of all the years to go on. And again, 11 months out, I'm like, this is the year. I'm going to train all year. Gavin's going to be blown away at how fast this guy can be. And I didn't do that. So side personal stuff, I had a lot of drama that year, problems with my parents. So I decided to do 23 just for fun. So I tried to train enough to not embarrass myself, and tried taking a different mindset to competition, one that I very rarely, or if ever, have been in. And that's racing as a participant, or just being a participant and not racing to win. Because I can't even find the words for it. Like, how do I describe doing an event where I'm not trying to win and punish people with my legs? It's unheard of. I've just never done it. It's taken me 50 years to figure out how to get to that point. And that's what I did in 23. And I had a really good time. Like it made it much easier to face the challenges and the adversity of the race, knowing that I didn't care. I honestly did not care about the overall, and I couldn't let myself, because I'd gone through so many months of not being able to do what I want and not being able to focus. And then even when I'm in the air, being distracted, am I going to get the emergency phone call where I have to take off immediately? And it changed things a lot for me. It allowed me to sit back and observe, and just notice some things that I don't always notice because I'm in too much of a hurry. I found that in 23, pacing was really important as I was watching the people around me. I can't get what I want out of myself physically, but I still have a lot of differences and things that I can tap on. And the young guys, it's just cheating. So damn fast, especially on the short stuff. And but they're fast and dumb. Just Oh, so fast and dumb. Like, I'm like, wow, you guys are really quick going up this hill. And then you get to the second one, you're like, you want to stop for a peanut butter jelly sandwich? You're looking like shit. They're quick on that first climb. And then that second climb, it's just like, man, did you get hit upside the head by a 2x4? I noticed that people just aren't as good at pacing and managing their nutrition and their water and understanding their power outputs and their threshold levels and heart rates or whatever it is that you want to pay attention to monitor yourself. It seems like all the guys that are faster than me don't really understand the concepts of threshold and how it affects your caloric utilization when you're racing, because they seem to blow up later in the day. On the short tasks, you know, that's all that matters because there's only one big hike anyway, so it's full gas. But if it's a normal day and we're going to be out all day, if you're sure you're going to fly the whole task, it doesn't matter. But if there's any chance your feet touch the ground, you better not have screwed up that first climb, because what you do in the first hour and a half of the day really controls what you can do in the last 3 or 4 hours of the day. And I saw that a lot last year, people blowing up on the second climbs. But you know, that doesn't always work out to my benefit. I'll give you a little side story of how it worked out to my detriment again, because as people were dropping like flies and bombing out on launch, suddenly I felt that I was in pole position, and then the little and you start going crazy and pushing too hard, and 1 minute I'm at the front of the pack and the next minute I'm bouncing across the ground again. Shouldn't have launched then. The wind was way too strong. What were you thinking? Because you get locked in that mindset. And I was in race to goal mode, and I didn't want to launch right away. I was in the front at that point. I wanted company, and Pal had just launched and was heading out to mark a thermal. I'm like, I'm going to time this perfect. I'm going to be freaking golden. He's going to glide right off that point. He's going to mark something for me. I'm going to wait till that happens, and I'm going to launch, and we're going to go right up together, and we're going to be first to goal. This is total aces. And I tried to execute that strategy, but what I didn't account for was what exactly the wind was doing at that perfect time to launch, to glide out to the thermal that Pal had just marked for me. And instead of launching, I inflated, got pinned, and then started getting drugged backwards and stumbled for a second, bounced a few times, and tore up my gear again. And shame. So after that, I said, cool your heels, and slowed it down. And I found a good launch somewhere else and took my time and let everyone fly past me, and reevaluate my situation, my skills, my expectations, and proceeded to fly the wrong direction on course and get lost. So my lesson from that was don't take an entire year off of using your instrument and flying cross country and think you can just come out of 12 months off and follow the stupid little arrow correctly because the wind was so strong. I thought I had to fight crosswind instead of follow the stupid arrow, and I went way crosswind when I could have just flown downwind right to the freaking turn point. And it's such a shame. You're like, everyone's at home watching the live tracking. It's like, what's Kevin doing? Oh, he's got this. He must know something I don't. I'm far too stupid watching this event to possibly know more than Kevin does. One of my friends told me that. I'm like, damn, dude, why didn't you just call me? I got my headset. I was totally confused. I was going way off course. And like 3 or 4 people watched it happen, and no one told me anything. So live and learn. My lesson learned from that one was don't take too much time off cross country and using your actual instrument, because it's important. Even if you know how to do it well, and even if you've done it thousands of times, if you're not current and fresh, sometimes you can make that boneheaded mistake crosswind and goof yourself up. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Oh, and then the next day we had a pretty weird day. Everyone raced hard to the top, and then we kind of gaggled up a little bit, got spread out. People went down course line, and unlike most days, the day got worse rather than better. And it wasn't obvious because the sun was out, but just as we headed from the mountains into the flats, the kids just got softer and softer and softer. And I felt like I was in a good position. We were scratching along. Aaron and some other guys, they kind of bombed out and top landed at this itty bitty site, and we flew over them. I'm like, man, we got those guys. And it was just so scratchy and horrible, that I ended up bombing out further down course line. But I was in good position. I think I was in second. I think Marcus was in front of me marking something that was working on a climb, but the rest of the afternoon was just blown launch, like not blown launch, but blown attempt to get up after another. I think I relaunched maybe 3 times, and each time it just, they were too low and the conditions were too crappy to actually get up. And I was having fun with it. I was managing my water really closely because I was pushing it and starting to get to the point of dehydration. But that was the card I was playing. So I knew my performance levels were going down. My mental acuity was going down with the fatigue. But I plodded forward on the off chance that, something would click and I'd get my easy glide the rest of the way in goal. But I also was dialing back my aggression, knowing that I was dehydrating, I was getting calorically deficient, and I was compromising myself. And finally, on the last launch, this wicked valley wind that I had heard on the radio or in the chat or something that was haunting people further up the course line came through. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I think it's, all those other screw ups, those other bouncing incidents, they smack some sense into me, because in this condition, I was close to the front. I wanted to get on course. I wanted to head on down to goal, but the launch conditions were deteriorating, and the reality of the weather data was it was getting worse, and no amount of hopium was going to change that. And I really needed to accept that no matter how bad I wanted to hold my position and be competitive, I had to accept the reality of I was either going to wait and so I was going to get really, really lucky, or I was going to have to walk down that hill and start running. And um, it definitely wasn't going to be, Carter, you could pull this off. You could launch in this and it'd be okay, because everything was telling me that it would be the most challenging and most dangerous launch that I had ever attempted. And it didn't matter if I thought I could do it, I shouldn't. And that's what ended up happening. I stuck around and waited for a while. I watched another guy on the ridge next to me. He ended up getting plucked and chucked, and I had 911 ready on my phone because I couldn't see where he went. He got inflated and drug off the hill completely against his will in an out of control turn, and it's just luck that he got around the corner and didn't hit the hill. And at that point, my mind was already made up. I was going to be walking down anyway. But it was really hard to witness that because it was a pilot I know, it was a guy I care about. So it made it even all the harder. And we were separated enough in distance that I couldn't really talk to him, and I had to just watch, powerless to do anything about it. But unrelated to that, I hiked down and called my wife, and we went and got dinner because I did not feel like pounding out another 3 or 4 hours on the ground just for a few points. And that's part of my change in competitive mentality, because I had my come to Jesus moment many times before, and I had decided my motivation level for the event was not focused just on absolute score. There was too much adversity, and driving myself that hard causes mistakes and doesn't necessarily bring me pleasure or satisfaction, because I look back knowing I should have done something different. I'm a father. I have 2 children, and no amount of life insurance is going to be standing at the front door when that 18-year-old boy comes up trying to pick up my 14-year-old daughter. Like, the shotgun doesn't load itself. So I had to really think hard about decisions like that to take into account. I love doing well. I love earning the respect of my peers. I love trying to set a high mark. I love punishing people. I love hearing about people complaining on T3, the next one, about the running, that I was pushing it too hard. I love that stuff, but I have to accept that I don't love it more than the other things in my life that are important, because it's so easy for me to get drawn in and completely consumed by the competitiveness, because I've done it for so many decades before being married, before having kids, before having responsibility. And I have to find a way to balance the joy in both of those. So that's a really, really important thing to me. So the last task of last year was we ran like the trail marathon in the woods. And what was really important for that was focusing on route finding, figuring out how you could optimize the route through the woods, where they had the turn points where you could cut off trail. And yeah, I spent tons of time poring over the satellite imagery and the trail maps and everything. And man, I thought, nobody's working this hard. I've gamed all these guys. And then come race day, I swear, every other pilot knew the same shortcuts through the woods. And I'm like, did they spend as much time on this as me, or did they just like figure it out in 5 minutes and go to bed? I mean, I spent hours mapping out lines and figuring out everything. I also learned a couple other things. It is sometimes in a situation like that, it's very disadvantageous to lead. So I wanted to set the pace and get people to threshold and suffer a little bit to maybe pay the price later. And what ended up happening was people took route variations right behind me and then ended up ahead. And I didn't realize that until much later. And it was kind of frustrating. Like, I was running the fastest, but I didn't get the furthest out on course the quickest because of those little teeny optimizations here and there. And every once in a while, Gavin and the task committee, they throw out a course where little things like that end up being hugely important. So I definitely learned that it's not always best to lead from the front, just like in race to goal competition. You don't necessarily want to be the lone wolf off the front, because there's power in numbers and racing together. So funny side story, just because I think it speaks to my change in focus over the years, and also just how incredibly brutal last year was. Without very much training, we did that. What was it, Gavin? Like 3.5 hour continuous run. It was essentially a marathon. It was pretty brutal. And me being the former runner, I feel like I have so much to prove. And it came down to the line on like those last 6 miles of running downhill. I'm like, Ben, I got you, bro. I'm going to hurt you, brother. I'm getting you. And then we're running downhill at like below 6 minutes per mile, which I should be able to do easily, which is an absolute nightmare now for me. And I'm like, this hurts so bad, but there's just so much downhill. You can just keep doing it. And it was just so much abuse running that fast downhill for so long. And one of the other Euros was right in front of me at the end, man, like 15 seconds. And so I just punished myself the whole way to try to get that, because there's no flying at the end. You better throw up, Carter, or you didn't earn it. And it was quite a sufferfest. And then you hop in the car the next day and drive 7 hours home, and you're all locked up and you're a total mess. So rewind about 2 weeks before that, my eighth grade daughter had run her first cross country season in a while, and she had just done her first race. And she was so nervous before. She's like, Dad, what's going to happen? They're all going to beat me. Like, I'm going to be last. I'm like, sweetie, you're not going to be last. You're going to do fine. You're going to do great. So she does the race. She does awesome. And she says to me afterwards, she's real shy and meek. She goes, Dad, what would I have to do to be, faster? And it's like, oh, the tears are coming down my eye. I'm like, well, sweetie, you just have to practice. You just have to train. You don't just show up and run and be your best. You have to put in the effort. And she goes, well, Daddy, will you practice with me? Oh, of course I was. Just overwhelmed with emotion. So we got this little deal where her bus takes like an hour now. So I offered her a trade. Instead of taking the bus, get up at the same time, go running with me before school. We'll work on some of this stuff, and then I'll just drive you to school. Like that's worth driving you if you're going to do a morning workout with me. Great. So this started about 2 weeks before Xredrocks, and I'm trying to figure out: am I the crazy athlete dad, like pushing his child too hard, or is this something genuinely coming from her? Did she do this event, and is she motivated? And I'm having trouble figuring that out. It's like, because I know I want it, I just don't know if she wants it. So I'd been waking her up first thing in the morning, all these mornings, and then uh, Xredrocks was the test because I was gone for a couple of days. And come Monday morning, you bet your ass there's a part of me that did not want to set that alarm. I wanted to sleep in. My legs hurt, my back hurt, like I was a mess. And come 6 o'clock, I heard this door handle click and the door. Those are tears of joy pouring down my cheeks. That's what I say. And out on that run, she I was trying not to grunt and moan. It was like every freaking step. She goes, Dad, why are you making all those noises? What's wrong with you? I'm like, oh, nothing. She's like, are you okay? I'm like, never been better. It's the greatest moment of my life. It was just so devastating. So it's my funny side story. I'm going to segue into, I got to speed up, man. We're already at 50 minutes. Mental preparation. So I do going into events now with the hike and fly, like I've touched on, I do a lot of soul searching. I want to identify my macro large goals and then hone in on some micro goals, the small tasks. My goals have evolved over time with multiple responsibilities and not being able to throw 100% into things like I used to, and then adjusting my expectations accordingly. For people advancing in the sport, I think it's really important to set expectations that are realistic to your current skill set and your current training level, so that you're not beating yourself up. You're not setting yourself up for disappointment. Like the joy is in the journey. Like what's great about paragliding is it's the task or the challenge that just cannot be conquered. There's too much to learn, too many things to do, too many challenges. And I really like to try to focus on appreciating all the little ones that come along, because that's what gets us all so addicted. If it was just one and done, we'd be bored and move on to something else. But paragliding, it's like Elliot laying out the Reese's Pieces for E.T., if anyone is actually old enough to remember that movie. It's like the little Reese's Pieces trail that just keeps you coming. You're like, oh, I need another one. I need another one. Oh, that thermal was amazing. Or I got to 18K. That was incredible. You need that bait to keep it fun and keep it exciting and going along. And if you just focus on one thing, I want to be national champion by 2025, or I want to win the X Alps in 27. You're like, society and the Olympic dream and all this stuff, they get us sometimes a little bit too focused on those ultimate goals. And those ultimate goals are important. They provide motivation and drive, but they can be very blinding. So as a former athlete in the Olympic movement, I've seen a lot of people's lives just turn inside out by being overly competitive. So maybe I carry some trauma from that and have a slightly different perspective, but it's good to have very high aspirational goals to drive you, but it's also really important to have the intermediate ones and the micro goals and the little challenges to keep rewarding yourself, because we do these things to derive pleasure. And if you don't derive pleasure from chasing your goals, then you're not going to enjoy it, and you're going to teach yourself to not love the thing that you love. Like if every time you do something awesome paragliding, you're disappointed, then it's not fun. After dozens and dozens of times of being unhappy with your flying, you're like, flying sucks. Like that's how people get burned out. They have that negative reinforcement with their pleasure activity, and they untrain the fun. And then no one wants to do that. I really believe in all of my sports in breaking the larger challenge into set of mini challenges. So like it's for me, it would not be about top position at Xredrocks 2023. It's about having some awesome launches or hitting my maximum vertical velocity on a set of climbs or not being 20 minutes behind Eric Clammer, you know, on the big climb. Something I set up these little micro goals or, you know, really nailing my landings or, you know, another important goal is not having any oh shit moments where you're really just flying on hope and prayers that you get out of the situation. I really want to plan my flying that I don't have those high stress events because in competition, whether it be race to goal or hike and fly, it's so easy to put yourself in that position. So those are some of the micro goals that I set. See, physical preparation. So skill preparation for hike and fly events. I think crucial is race to goal competitions. So you can learn how to thermal and race with a group and use the collective power of other pilots and to see where that's really advantageous in hike and fly racing, even though it's like somebody sets off a hand grenade and you get scattered all over the place on course and in time and in distance. It is still really important to, when the opportunity is there, to be able to gaggle fly with a group. The wolf pack runs much faster than the lone wolf in almost all situations. Really important instrument practice, setting goals, setting tasks with widely different radius sizes so that you can experience the different layouts and what's displayed on your instrument and what to do when you get confused, because sometimes you're out on course and you get confused and what you've memorized beforehand is not what you're seeing on the screen, and you got to sort that out. And you can't go blasting off 90 degrees of course line in a strong crosswind like I did. Like it's hard to come back from that. I really like to practice landing in odd places, and not necessarily not in a dangerous way, but in a way that challenges me within my skill set. Because part of the way we should fly as pilots is always make things as easy as possible. I kind of believe that that's something I took from hang gliding after living in the fast lane for a while and witnessing a lot of accidents and being at the highest level of the sport and being able to get away with that stuff all the time, and then taking a step back of going from being a full-time, you know, factory pilot to just being the weekend warrior that comes out and, you know, can still fly a task but is not flying 6 days a week. And the reality check of when you're not a full-time pro, you can pull off some amazing things sometimes, but you're always that 1% more likely to make a mistake. And one thing I accepted as a middle-aged dad hang glider pilot is I don't care if I can drop this hang glider on a dime 10 feet from the gate at the edge of the paddock. I'm landing in the middle. I don't care. My lazy ass is going to walk the glider out, because if I goof that up, you know, I'm going into a fence, and that's yet another stupid injury that keeps me from training. You know, it's like a mental game I play where I see the cool option and I see the safer option, and I force myself to take the safer option just to force myself to get used to doing that. And so that's a game I play with myself. But in terms of hike and fly, I do try to challenge myself on landings and top landings because it's such an integral part of Xredrocks, especially landing in wonky places, because that's just what happens when you follow courses over non-standard areas, because, you know, these aren't established routes where people have been flying cross country for years. Like, you know, you're taking weird lines through the mountains, and you want to make sure that you have the skills to do that safely. Sometimes I put in runs at the end of my free flights back to the car. So I'm just getting that in my mindset. My journey for today is not just flying my local site around for an hour or two and doing a cross country and landing back at the car. My journey for today is to fly around, do some top landings, fly a little cross country, and then land somewhere random and make my way back to the car. I don't have to be off in the mountains to do something like that. And it just gets your head psychologically wrapped around doing things that way, landing and then moving on to pounding pavement. And I get a lot of pleasure out of that, because then I'm not just flying and feeling guilty that I'm not exercising, and I'm not just exercising feeling like I'm not training my flying. I'm getting both in. And so, me personally, I find that's really tough with a full-time job and a family, is training both what you need to fly and training what you need on the ground. And so the time management of the two is really, really important, because you can't do one or the other. You got to do both. And depending on what your weaknesses are or what you need to address for your upcoming events, it's important that you address that smartly. So, launch practice. I see Sky's on the screen. He sees me practicing launches all the time. I like to sometimes go out at a very familiar site that I know very well, and then push my limits of conditions. Because then I'm isolating just one variable. Because I seem to go to Xredrocks every year. I'm like, dang, it's windy. This launch is really windy. It's never this windy in Colorado. And it always catches me a little flat-footed. So I try to pick some windows at my most familiar sites where I can launch in stronger conditions, try cobras, try aggressive running, all kinds of different techniques that so I have them in my bag of tricks, because the fun time, the real hike and fly for me, is really only once or twice a year. So it's important that the rest of the days in the year, I do some of the crucial stuff that prepares me for the situations that I'm going to get in, because I know the competitive Kevin is going to try to do it anyway, even if it's probably a little too windy. So I try to focus on that, stronger winds and then higher grades, so steeper slopes. I try to find vegetation challenges that screw up the wing. I may be sometimes a little too cavalier about difficult launches, but I have this mindset that if I blow the launch going down the hill, at least I don't have 120 pounds of hang glider ready to hit me in the back of the head. I'm just going to stumble with my own body weight. So I try to take solace in that, and sometimes push it a little bit harder than I should. Landing practice is important. For the challenge division, there's probably, I'm expecting Gavin wouldn't do any mandatory top landings. But it's still important to have all of the landing types in your toolbox: speed bar landings, steep turn swoop, flapping, even though it's frowned upon, landing in tailwind, as long as it's light, pointed toes, being ready to run, all the things you might end up accidentally doing or getting stuck with when you're flying in adversity in a hike and fly competition. Over the years, I found that I try to practice this stuff, but I also have to be really careful, because I've gotten burned. Like, it's one thing to have a not so good top landing and bruise your foot a little bit, but it's another when you need to be training or running 20 or 30 miles a week and your foot is bruised or your ankle is twisted or something like that. It's not like you can ice your ankle a couple days and keep right on paragliding. If you mess up your ground training, you really pay the price. And I've struggled with that every year, whether they're random incidents around the house, like stepping on a nail doing home construction, or a little bit of a botched top landing, and then it disrupts your training. And for me, that's kind of devastating, because that's what I want to be doing the most, is getting strong on the ground. So you have to also take that into account with your preparation, is that you don't set yourself back. For actual race preparation, I think it goes without saying, like any race to goal comp, it's even more important to study the terrain that you're going to be flying over, satellite imagery, topographic maps, doing as much as you can in weeks before the event. annoying Gavin, begging him for the waypoint lists like months before anyone else has thought about it. Like, I gotta look at this stuff. I want to be ready. Putting in the time so that when you're out there experiencing it, you have a frame of reference. That's one thing. And then also, if you've put in the time to study the routes, it gives you comfort so that there's less questions and less stress when you're racing, because there's so many things stressing you out when you're racing. You don't need to be adding more to that. Like, I can't read my GD phone because I don't have reading glasses. Like, I mean, there's nothing pisses me off more than sweating all over my phone at the top of the hill, and like I can't read it. Like, I don't know which way to go. This is so annoying. So trying to put in as much prep ahead of time so that doesn't happen. Studying the waypoints, where they're located, studying where the launches are, getting a feel for the distances, studying the weather patterns in an area is massively important. Understanding what the trends are for valley winds, what happens in the afternoon in a particular area. Does it develop valley winds? Is it prone to blowouts with gust fronts? Just all those details. Collect as much local information as possible, because it's, it could make or break your experience out on course. Studying routes to launches is really important. I like to dig around on Gaia or Strava or whatever else. Look at what Eric Clammer did, because I know he did the homework to get up the hill fast. I love finding that stuff, because come race day, it's like the lights got turned on and the cockroaches scatter. Sometimes people go all different ways, and it introduces doubt and anxiety. Well, which way should I go? It's so important. It's really good to study those routes and know your competitors and what they prefer in advance, so that you're not trying to figure it out. Because in that 20 or 30 seconds, when people go different directions, your decision can haunt you for the next 30 or 45 minutes or whatever. Even if it doesn't matter, it's just that doubt that can get in your head. And when you're trying to go hard, it's good not to have doubt. It's important to always be positive. Again, it's important to practice navigating with these apps. I use Gaia or Garmin Explore, Locust Maps, Fat Map, now Strava. They have some really great features with picking routes for you on trail that they didn't have a bunch of years ago. And it's really good to master those as best you can. And then always in training and in racing, planning out your calories, what kind of calories you're going to get, when you're going to get them, and water, and how to keep all those things going in to keep your performance at the highest level. For endurance training, what I try to focus on for hike and fly is building time and vertical. Unfortunately, unlike cycling, you can't be quite as scientific, but I do really like to track stress closely, using like a Garmin watch or something to really quantify how much effort I'm putting in and figuring out how much rest I'm going to need, and then using those tools to analyze my performance in workouts. Because for me, it's really important to see what is an off day, because an off day isn't a day that you feel bad or a day that you feel good is an on day. And an off day is a day that you're not putting out the numbers, and an on day is a day that you are putting out the numbers. Because I found that heart rate and perceived effort and perceived feelings of freshness, they all lie. And it's really good to have hard numbers to compare to. And for me personally, it's respecting when I'm not meeting the exercise goals of that particular workout and pulling the plug. You get faster by resting, not by training. So training stresses you out, but you actually get faster when you're resting. So if you're not fast when you're doing a workout that you should be fast for, you're just wasting your time. Nutrition. It's important to train your gut to race. So while doing your workouts, you ingest the things that you're going to be ingesting while racing. Get your stomach used to the stress if you're dealing with threshold climbs, because once you cross threshold, it's a whole different ball game of actually getting calories through your gut. And that's a really important skill to master if you're trying to race your fastest. I believe in logging your training diet. I really believe in logging everything. I don't do it as much as I should, but I've been doing this stuff for decades. It's a little bit easier to track, but I encourage everybody to log everything in their training, in their diet, in their flying experiences. It's just so useful. I like to monitor water loss versus effort versus temperature. It's like that story I recounted about us going really far in the desert and water loss being a problem. I like to have numbers for that so that I'm prepared, because hike and fly is not just an endurance race. It's a race for survival, and that could be make or break if you dehydrate or have a problem on course. So it's really important to keep track of that, monitor how your body responds, monitor how your performance goes up or down, or how you feel and how that affects you. Get really dehydrated and see what happens. Like, don't get really dehydrated and get really tired and then go huck off a cliff launch in 20-mile-per-hour wind, but definitely push yourself to see how your body responds so that you have those data points when you are under stress in racing, because it will absolutely happen in racing. You'll be stressed to that point and you'll have to make crucial life decisions. Be observant of your mental and physical deterioration with increasing exertion during intense training. Well, that's just what I said. Sorry. So that note I already covered. My biggest takeaway from what I've learned of 3 years of Xredrocks is the obstacle and the devil standing between me and what I want is me. It's making decisions that are too aggressive and don't respect my skills and the current situation. I get sucked into this belief that the great perfect race is made and earned by me, and that's not always the case. Any athletic competition is a combination of variables and chance and luck of the draw, and every little micro challenge you optimize to the best of your ability, and at the end of the day the chips land where the chips land. And for me, it's really important to take that mindset so I don't put too much pressure on individual decisions. Because when I put too much pressure on individual decisions, that's when I have incidents. So for me personally, I would say 3/4 of all my incidents in the last 3 years have been in a hike and fly competition where I have not properly adapted to that different environment. So I believe in training your weakness in everything you do. You identify the slowest 50% of your total game and you focus on that. You don't focus on your strengths. They're already your strengths. You focus on your weaknesses. So for me, it's focusing on making sure that I make it to the finish line. Not that I'm the fastest runner or I fly the longest, quickest task. It's for me, I have to focus on making it there, because no matter what I do, I'm going to hike pretty fast. I'm going to run pretty fast, and I'm going to fly half decent. I'm not going to completely screw those up. But what is going to mess me up is a big mistake. So I focus on doing everything I can to try to prevent me from making any big mistakes, and then just let the rest happen organically. So that's everything I got. I talked as fast as I could and I still couldn't get done in under an hour. I'm sorry.
That was awesome, man. That was great.
I guess I took too many notes. I had too much stuff to talk about. I really thought I had like 25 minutes worth. Damn. Do you guys have some questions for me? Because I could run down any of those rabbit holes of anything I talked about, especially nutrition and training, but I just didn't want to overdo it.
I have a question just quickly. Have you
Sure.
found the sweet spot for what you're carrying for water?
I as little as possible.
Yeah, totally.
I'm a weight weenie. I don't like carrying a ton, but you have to be realistic about what you need. I think there's some things I'm good at. Evaluating my state of dehydration and also being able to handle probably a little bit more than most people is one of those things. So I probably push that envelope a little bit further. I get burned on it sometimes, but For me, it's probably, to answer your question without a bunch of rambling, it's probably in that 2.5 to 3.5 liter range. I don't like carrying a lot of weight. I want to find an equation that has me resupplying. I have a clip-on filter. I have the Osprey bladders that have the quick disconnect, and then I got one of those, that main one they sell at REI, the little inline
The light
filter.
one, yeah.
Yeah, and I put two clips on that. So if it's a task where I think I might have to grab emergency water because I blew it, I can just clip that in line with my bladder and use it. I've never had to use it, but that's kind of my strategy. I'm gonna race light and fast, and then if it goes south, I'm just gonna quit. Like, go for glory, and then if it doesn't work out, I'm gonna go in survival mode, and points be damned.
Yeah.
Um, so not a ton of water for me, but that task that we had with the long run, I carried as much as I could, and unfortunately I didn't have another bottle or another holding source with me, or I would have taken more, because when um I forget the name of it, the LZ with the crop circle, and where was it Evan that got blown backwards,
Oh
and
yeah, and the windy day back in the
yeah,
Kushner
there
Valley.
I wanted another container. And if I had had another container, and if I had mission planned for the 20K run down course, I would have had something. But reading the weather for the day, I blew it. I should have just put an empty storage container in my bag. So that's a lesson learned. Maybe that's an option. Carry around a really big empty container that's not very heavy, so that when things change, you can adapt. Because in that situation, I really wanted to take more water, but I didn't have a container to put it in.
Mm.
I was doing the calculations with the watch and the distance and the time, and it's like I had calculated I needed 5 liters and I only had three.
Mm.
So it wasn't going to work. I wasn't going to dry out that bad. So
Yeah, and I mean everybody that was in your gaggle down at that south turn point, everybody was in really bad shape. I mean, everybody needed water, so there
yeah,
was yeah. I mean, we're learning about that from the
yeah,
organization
yeah,
standpoint every time too, but it can be tricky. Cool.
yeah. Well, I needed water, but only enough to a little top off what I felt fine.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Right, totally.
That was a good day for me. I did it right, and I wasn't devastated. I'm very binary. Like, I either have kind of a normal day, or a day where I just completely gut myself, and my wife has to like roll me out in a wheelchair. Like, we're ending this day with a 26-mile run in 3.5 hours. And she's
I mean,
like, why do you do this to yourself? Why do you do this to yourself? You bitch and moan and complain for a week. Why? Anyway, sorry. Uh, any other questions?
So over the past 3 years, like looking at the top 10 of the
Yep.
finishers, what do you think is the differentiating factor between being like one, two, three versus seven, eight, nine?
Well, Duragati has shown that prowess in the air is paramount. Um, you don't have to be the fastest ascender, but you have to be strongest in the air. So if you take, for example, comparing Eric Clammer, who doesn't have a lot of race to goal or any race to goal experience, he's mostly a high mountain alpinist. He is the quickest up the hill every time. Guy is just an animal. Um, but Duragati is just always really fast. He's not the fastest up the hill, but he's not far behind. And especially in 2023 last year, I noticed he was not as strong on the climbs. I think the year before he had done a trip to Pakistan and had a lot of high altitude exposure. Um, but he's always the best, or one of the best, in the air. And that really defines things for him. And I look at the top. I'm not looking at 10th as much, so I'm not paying quite as much attention to that. But really, it's that flying skill in cross country that I think is a real differentiator. Think of it, the endurance game, the climbing skill is the qualification round. It's the prelims, and then how well you fly in the air is the final. That's the Olympic final.
it's interesting, I can't remember what day it was 2 years ago when you guys goal was Selena. Was that the last day? No, second. See. Um,
Selena, was that the day we got cut short by
The
the rain?
overdevelopment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember but there, yeah, I think it was that day. But Aaron won.
Yep.
Tangy was second, but he smoked himself so hard trying to hang on to Aaron
Yep. Yep.
going up to Cove that I'm convinced that he didn't fly as well in the air because he was
Yeah.
I mean, he just ego, he had to hang on to Aaron, and
Yep.
that's misreading things. He had to let him go. I mean, Aaron
Yep.
was just incredibly fit that year. Like you said, he was coming off that Pakistan trip.
Yeah.
His red blood cell stuff was through the roof.
Yeah.
He was an animal. And Tanguy just broke the hike and fly world record yet again this year. I mean, Tanguy is no slouch. His legs were this big.
Mm-hmm.
But he just killed himself. He was actually asleep in Selena. He just fell asleep in the
Yeah.
parking lot. He
Yeah.
was smoked. So you
Well,
really got it. You brought that up several times. That's a really important point.
yeah,
Each day it's a stage race.
it
Each
is a
day is its
stage
own
race.
your own unique race, and
Yep.
you've got to play what you got in the tank.
Yep. And I will also comment that those guys were flying really well that day because, I don't have a ton of hours flying cross country and paragliders. And as far as I'm concerned, they glide like crap and they never make it to where I want to go. But when we were flying that day, I was looking at the sky. I'm like, whoa, we're dropping down into first gear. This is a mess. And dude, they blazed that section. And I know how to fly cross country fast, and I definitely was not fast that day. They smoked it. So, just really, really impressive flying in the air on so many occasions. Aaron, last year in the story I told about, bounce across the ground story number two, Aaron was one of the first guys to launch in that situation. And in my mind, bomb out. Like what I saw, that man bombed out. His
Dude,
flight was over,
he was
and
on the
that's what I had
deck. I
registered
saw
in
that
my
whole
mind.
thing. He
And
was
when I
on
looked
the
at the
ground.
track log and what he did, man, it's crazy. He sold
Yeah.
his soul to the devil. Like
Yeah.
next level, like scratching and cross country skill. Just massively impressed. Like when I showed up for my first hike and fly competition, it's the arrogant egotist in me. I'm like, this is what these guys got on the hill. Man, I do this in my sleep. Um, of course, I'm talking too much shit because I can't, because I try to train harder and it doesn't work out. But still, comparing apples to apples, oranges to oranges, the hike and fly guys are fit. But in the grand scheme of the endurance world, like the average hike and fly pilot is, they're not endurance superstars. I mean, they're fit, but um, I, I don't know how to say it without being an asshole, but
No, you're right. You're totally right. They're not
like
killing
a
Jordanes.
true runner or a true cyclist or a true mountain climber, like they smoke that stuff. I had someone giving me a hard time once the other day about how quickly I'd done 14,000 foot mountains when I was in college. And they're making it like it's such a big deal. And I'm like, no, it's not at all. There's dudes twice as fast as me. Like you're aiming the wrong bar. You're like, what you think the human body is capable of is just astronomically higher than where you think it actually is. Like my VO2 max sucks now compared to what it used to be. And I'm not that far behind the fastest climbers. And I'm easily down 30 points from where I used to be. And I was never that fast vertical. I'm just too big. I'm a cyclist more than a runner. I have too much mass behind me. So yeah, the ultimate potential is, I would say, really, really high for what can be done. And didn't in X Alps this year, I think that came out a little bit more where the athleticism is starting to get established to a much higher level. It's not like before where success was a phenomenal pilot who could also hike pretty fast and plan good routes. It's like it's being defined more and more by an actual elite endurance athlete who also flies really well. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's, it just keeps getting faster,
yeah,
and that's because they're covering ground on they're covering ground faster. But it still goes down to the best pilot. Yeah, it
Yep.
always does. It
Yep.
always does. And, that's why somebody like Powell, who really isn't, he's nowhere near the fitness level like you're talking about. Certainly
Mhm.
wasn't at the Xredrocks last year, but he can still do really well.
Well, he has the physiology
Still,
to go feel
still,
fast.
still
He may not be
fly really
trained for it, but
well.
he's got the genetics.
He's got the genetics. He looks like a marathoner, doesn't he? I mean, he's
Yes.
thin as hell and tall,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
and most of those guys are.
Yep.
Cool. Anybody? One more question. Let's take one more, and then we should probably call it a night. But appreciate it, Kevin.
Hey, I will definitely say if anybody has specific questions about training or nutrition or anything like that, feel free to hit me up on Telegram or wherever. I'm happy to share the knowledge because I'm no longer trying to be the best. 10 years ago, man, I had a whole book full of secrets. I wasn't sharing none of them. But now I really enjoy seeing people find success in all of their sporting adventures, and everyone's going to kick my ass, so I don't care. I'll tell you whatever I know.
Oh,
I'd
there's
like to,
actually. Oh, good.
no, yeah, thanks. I'd like to hear a little bit, Kevin, about how you're pacing yourself. You mentioned, being at threshold,
Yep.
and if you're not using the perceived exertion or your heart rate, how are you actually doing the pacing, like in the moment?
Oh, so in the moment, I'm definitely using RPE. I'm just talking about in training.
Hmm.
So what I learned from training exclusively based by power mountain biking is that there's often a disconnect between RPE and what your body is actually doing at the minute level, and the personal like parameters or windows I'd set for myself. If I lost 5 or 10%, I'd pull the plug on a workout. And that is a really small window. So that's what I mean in training. In hike and fly racing, I'm really looking closely at threshold and how close I am to it and how it's affecting my digestion. So as you get to threshold, you're consuming glycogen and all your glucose, all your multiple forms of glucose stores at a much higher rate. So if you're anywhere near threshold, you need to be replacing that in the most efficient way possible, because eventually, you're chasing a moving train, and eventually that train's going to leave you in the dust, and it's going to be a bad scene. And that's what I see happen to a lot of people. They go at threshold or above threshold, burn out all their glycogen stores, they're completely bonked, and they're just a train wreck. So back to your original question about managing the pacing: respiration rate, heart rate, and perceived effort. I look at all three because that's the best you got for running. You don't have an actual power meter that would tell you that you're down 10 or 15 watts, but those are pretty good.
Yep.
You an add-on to this from a non-scientific standpoint, you cannot bonk. You cannot bonk in a race. You're fucked if you bonk. So
Yes. Yes.
your day is over. And
Yep.
so so you really need to find where that is in training, and you can also tweak some really neat stuff with
Yeah.
either a ketogenic diet or some other things where you're training your body to work on fat. We're late in the game now to do that. The race is probably too close, but you can do a lot of things, but you really need to be in the real-time race, be listening and not just keep going when your
Yeah.
body's going, yeah, time, need something here. Because if you bonk, you're fucked.
My instinctual response to bonking and challenge division hike and fly is, if you bonk, you should stop. Your head is just not going to think clearly, and for two reasons: one, for a safety standpoint, you should stop, but two, at the point you bonk, unless it's the last day, your primary job is pulling your shit together for the next day, because recovering from bonking takes longer than 24 hours. So to replenish that much glycogen, after an hour and a half of exercise, an hour and a half after you've stopped, your rate of glycogen intake into your muscles slows down tremendously. So again, it's that train leaving the station, and there's only so much you can do in the 12 hours or so till you're starting racing the next day. And so your number one focus should be putting yourself back together so you can toe the line the next day and not be in the same position all over again.
Cool. Kevin, thanks, man. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
my pleasure.
Great talk. And then, yeah, everybody, if you got independent questions, if you need, if you want to talk on any kind of subject as in the previous talks, let us know and I'll put it together for you, either myself or we'll get somebody like Kevin to come on here and share their expertise. But thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
So everybody, good luck with your training. Keep kicking ass, do the work, and then race day will be easy. I look forward to seeing you all in the fall.
See you soon. Thank you.
Take care.
Right on, thanks.